Everybody needs an advocate.
Because I'm not there 24/7.
Families that have hemophilia mature faster.
I've been feeling a lot of anxiety lately.
I'm so tired of being strong.
To understand how far we've come helps you appreciate where we are now.
No is just no for this person. Somebody's gonna say yes sooner or later.
And it helps you understand that there are more steps to be taken in the future.
You're the first person I've met with a bleeding disorder.
Let's fight the disease and not the people who have it.
Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the diagnosis at 6 months, how that came to be, and what you learned at the annual follow-up a year later.
So we had no prior family history of hemophilia in our family. Bo was 6 months old, and he got a bruise under his arm that was about 1 inch long. It was hard as a rock, and we were just like, what the heck's going on here? We happened to have neighbors that she was an ER nurse, and he was a state trooper, and we had said something to them, and she had went to work that night, and she had just said, I'm going to talk to one of the doctors, and he had said, you need to go in for your appointment, get a ProTime test, and don't leave if they don't want to give it to you. And so we did, and they when they called us with the results, they said, we believe he has hemophilia, and they already had an appointment done at the university for us.
6 months old, and then a year later, you found out that in addition to the hemophilia, he had developed an inhibitor, correct?
Correct, yeah. It was just a routine blood test, and anything below 0.5 means that you don't have an inhibitor, and his, I think, came in at 0.7.
And just for anyone who's not sure, 0.5, 0.7, what's that referring to?
Well, that just means that's if the body is fighting off the medicine. The inhibitor comes in and says, whoa, you're not supposed to be there. I'm not going to let you be there. I'm going to attack you. So that's what it is.
And Bo's experienced, and the family has experienced quite a range in terms of the strength of the inhibitor, right?
Absolutely. That was one of the things that we had shared at the World Conference. Anybody that deals with an inhibitor knows that this is a lot of sleepless nights.
And when you talk about those sleepless nights, you had shared with me on one particularly bad occasion. Over the course of 3 days, you were infusing him every 2 hours?
Right. My husband and I slept with our cell phones. Thank God they did have cell phones at that time. We would take 4-hour shifts. And we literally did. He was on Novo 7, so we had to do every 2 hours.
And you had mentioned at one point just realizing this is not sustainable. We have to figure out something else.
We thought we had kind of turned a corner, and he was sleeping on the couch, and it was about midnight, and all of a sudden he just started screaming in pain, and we just said, that's it, we're done.
And you also mentioned that I think it was shortly after this, you pursued a second opinion on treatment for Bo in Chicago. Can you talk a little bit about that, what you learned from that, and how that actually wound up coming back to impact the community here in Iowa?
We took a day off work, and we went and we met Dr. Valentino in Chicago in one of his satellite clinics. And all of a sudden he's like, you're the last people here. Do you mind coming out into the lobby area? We're like, no. So literally we sat in the lobby area with the whole team in a semicircle, and they just said, there's no question, that's off, you can ask us anything. And we did, and we came back, and our team has been awesome to work with us since then, but we were at a point where we felt we needed more, and once we got some supporting documentation from that other doctor, then they were willing to work with us on that.
What I really like about that story of getting that second opinion in Chicago is I think it's a great example of how when we advocate for ourselves, if we're connected to the community, we are also advocating on behalf of the community, whether it's with an insurance provider, with a school, if it is seeking a second opinion from specialists who maybe have a larger patient population, see more differences and have come up with other strategies. It doesn't only benefit you and your family, it benefits the entire community. You have no family history of hemophilia, right?
Correct.
So certainly you're throwing one curveball, hemophilia, then another one, inhibitors. How have the two of you been able to support one another through all of this?
I think a lot of it just comes down to our personalities, because I'm, much more, I got to talk to people about it. I mean, some of you in the room are going, oh yeah, I know. I've been on those phone calls. And Craig's he's much more internalizing, where he'll more do his research on it, and then we'll talk about it. And, I thank God every day for my husband. He grounds me, because he's just a little bit more laid back, even though it drives me crazy too. But I mean, that's just normal.
That's expected.
That's expected, right?
That's what you sign up for when you do the vows, right?
Absolutely.
We'd also talked a little bit previously about your daughter Jordan,
right?
And I think you had said that one of the biggest challenges through all of this has been how to account for Jordan appropriately, and that's something that I think a lot of families with bleeding disorders, if there is an unaffected sibling, are faced with. How have you and Craig navigated that part of life?
I guess we're fortunate we have 2 kids, so we can play man-to-man defense, I guess, at some times too. But I mean, I think we just always tried to make, and she'll still to this day tell you that the world revolves around him. I mean, she just will. She's also the first one to take care of him when something happens as well, and she's been a huge supporter. So we also tried to make a very conscientious effort, like in those hospital situations or when it was an urgent situation, that she was the first phone call. So she was the first person to know what was going on, what we were doing, and what the schedule was. So we always tried to make sure that she did not hear it from somebody else and feel like she was, secondhand information. So that was something that we always really tried to make a very conscientious effort to do.
And how is Bo doing today? How is he this summer?
We always say after we spent 6 weeks in a wheelchair of non-weight bearing, any day where he's standing on his own 2 feet is a blessing. And I mean, we take so much for granted, and after that, we try not to, because it is a blessing that he's walking.
Last question before we invite Brody up as well. You've been a board member for 12 years, president for 10.
Right.
Shift coming up.
Right.
Pretty soon. What's something that you've seen grow in the chapter, let's say in the last 10 years as you've been president, that you're particularly proud of as you start to kind of shift into this different role?
I think I'm just so proud of the community that we have. When I attended my very first annual meeting, there was 4 kids in childcare and 2 of them were mine. We had 4 events. We had an adult retreat, a golf tournament, an annual meeting, and camp. And so look at all the things that we have now. The thing that I'm probably the most proud of is a couple of moms and I started the First Steps program. And, we just feel that we wanted to make sure that other families were able to get the support that we found with each other, and that we wanted to make sure that it was in a little bit more of a structured way. So that way, it was always there.
Yeah.
So that's probably the thing that I'm the most proud of, and probably just because that was on the groundbreaking starting. I mean, I started other programs, but I think that was just the one that was so near and dear to my heart, just because it was other moms and I what do we want this to look like? And we made it happen. So.
And it's extremely rewarding to build your own program and be able to see it grow and see the benefit of that. So. Right. Congratulations on all of that, and thanks for jumping in today. So, Brody, you are 15, right?
Yep.
You have severe factor IX deficiency.
Yep.
You're the middle of 3 kids in the family, right? Older brother, younger sister. So early on, no prior family history as well, right? You were also first, and you were diagnosed pretty early on.
Yeah.
You told me about a couple of early head traumas that kind of impacted your treatment and the way that the family went about treatment. Could you share a little bit about those stories?
Yeah, so when I was 3, I had a head bleed, and I don't remember how that, but then when I was...
You don't remember what was going on at 3 years old? No? I have such vivid memories of 3.
Okay, well, my grandma was shoe shopping, and then when I was 4, I fell out of a shopping cart at Kohl's and hit my head again, and then that was my second bleed to my head. So.
And then when did you start self-infusing?
When I was about 7.
And do you remember kind of going into that? Did you have any feelings about that? Was it hard for you?
Really, when I was a kid, I wasn't really afraid of needles or anything. Like going into camp, I stuck another nurse the year before when I was 6, and then I came back when I was at camp when I was 7. And I said I wanted to stick myself, and man, I did. And then I just have done it ever since.
And that doesn't faze you much, and it sounds like it never has.
No.
So you were always very athletically inclined and active, but then as you said to me, as things started to get more competitive, you had to make a choice, and you chose soccer as your primary sport. Can you share a little bit about, you shared this with me over the phone, what you've done and how you've worked with your treatment center to come up with a plan for how you can participate at the level that you do?
My nurses and everything else, they really gave my parents and me the reins of how we need to treat because of my activity level and in between practices and what tournaments are coming up and how many practices I have a week. Usually have 3 practices, so I just treat Monday, Wednesday, Friday to cope with the practices. But before state cup and massive tournaments like that, usually have practices all week long. So you still treat 3 times a week, depending on how much running and stuff you're doing in between.
You shared a story that I'd love for you to share again. You shared with me when you were first trying out for the state team, and kind of the journey of that for you as an example of a challenge that you have faced. Can you share that journey with everybody?
I was just playing for a club with all my friends and everything at school. It was just, you'd go and play, and it was competitive soccer and whatever. Well, my dad had found online that there was a state team, and he asked if I wanted to do it, and I said, yeah, sure, I'll try out or whatever, and I didn't make it the first year. And so the second year came around.
You
and
were,
I was,
what, 12 then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the second year came around and didn't make it again. And then the third year came around and I didn't make it again. And then I tried out this 1 year ago, this past summer, and I actually made it that time.
First of all, congratulations, because that's quite a journey. And to get up again and a second time, a third time, a fourth time, like that's not an easy thing to do. When you finally got the yes, do you remember that moment?
Yeah, so at the tryout, there was a bunch of the kids all the best kids in the state, really. There's probably like 5 or 6 of them. And at the tryout, they all were just like, the coaches just told them to sit out. So I was like, well, that was kind of weird. So I just said, I don't think I'm going to make it. And we were waiting, and Dad called me like halfway through the day and said, I have to show you something when I get home. And I was like, okay. So he got home and he pulled up the email and he handed it to me, and I was going through and I was like one of the last names. And I was like, wait, what is this? He goes, well, you just made the state team. Oh. And so, yeah, it was pretty awesome.
That's cool that you guys got to share that moment together, too. I'm sure as your dad, As your dad? What am I doing? I'm sure for your dad.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the importance of communicating with coaches, physical education teachers? You know, so often they've never encountered somebody with a bleeding disorder before, and we hear stories of how there can be an instinct toward trying to be overly cautious or overly protect the students or the young athlete in a way that can, as the student or young athlete, can feel like you're kind of being put in a corner in a way.
Right.
You had mentioned you haven't experienced that, but it also sounds like you've been very communicative. So can you just discuss a little bit what you've done to make coaches feel comfortable with you?
So really, all of my coaches have been great with this, and they just really just let me play, and they don't ask questions, and if I have a problem, they let me go and do what I need to do. And I've been really fortunate with that. But really, we've really communicated with all my coaches very well. They've been awesome.
Yeah, I think you get credit for that. You and your family get credit for that because you are communicative. If you're not describing to them what it is and what you can and cannot do, then you're putting all of the decision making and all the power in their hands, and they want to protect first. So good on you for being communicative. Okay, last bit. You also you've been a camper and are now a junior counselor for younger kids at camp.
Well, I was when I was at camp, but yeah.
You were when you were at camp. Fair enough. Tell me a little bit about what your experience has been as a junior counselor and starting to step into that leadership role.
Well, as I got older, I realized that not all the kids are like me, and not all the kids had a mom as a nurse, and I saw that some of the kids were struggling, and some of them just needed that extra push to stick themselves. And it's been pretty awesome seeing all the other little kids that have grown up, and I watched them grow up as they've gotten older, and where they started and where they are now.
Well, it's cool that you have that level of awareness that not everybody's necessarily in the same spot as you are, and I hope that as you continue to. So actually, well, just to put a bow on soccer, this is something that you intend to. You mentioned earlier my career. Your intention is to make this a career, yes?
Yes. So with the state team, we go to all these showcases and stuff, and the last one I went to was at St. Louis, and the one before that was in Vegas. So when I got to Vegas, I didn't really know what to expect, and I was very nervous, so I did not play well at all. And then when I went to St. Louis, I played a lot better, and I was more calmed down, and it was it's been a great experience, and try out again in August, and hopefully I make it.
Well, good luck to you. Good luck this afternoon and tomorrow. How many games do you have this weekend?
I have 2 today and 2 tomorrow, or hopefully 2 tomorrow.
I'm tired just hearing that, and also sore just hearing that. Hey everybody, it's the first guy with hemophilia to climb Mount Everest. Figured I'd just get it out of the way right at the top.
Sweet.
Right, so, what was it, May 22nd?
Yeah, May 22nd. Yep. So not even 2 months ago.
Yeah, so how you doing?
I'm good. Finally rested and recovered, mostly I guess.
Yeah, do you still feel a little getting your feet under you?
I feel pretty good now. It took weeks to like adjust to being back home and not sleeping in a tent and sleeping bag and like having internet and light switches and running water and all those like nice handy things that you get used to here.
Yeah.
So it took a while.
Another guy with severe 9 who was a competitive athlete in high school and beyond. You were a baseball player first, right?
Yeah, I was actually like obsessed with baseball growing up. It's like all I did from when I was 4 till 21 years old. I wasn't good enough to keep going after that.
Well, very few go beyond college,
yeah.
In fairness. But one of the things that came up, so Chris, in addition to climbing Mount Everest, we've been working on a documentary about the climb to profile both what is and is not possible when you're born with hemophilia, depending on your access to medicine, essentially. I feel like I'm interviewing you every like 2 weeks for the past number of months.
We've talked a lot.
We've talked a lot. My wife infused you.
Yes, she did.
Her first infusion ever. I wouldn't let her do it to me, but unlike you, this guy has a severe needle phobia. So he's happy. I think he would just let like a random person off the street do it if they would be into it.
Maybe. Yeah, I as long as I don't have to stick myself. I mean, I do it because I have to, but I don't really particularly care for it.
But you had mentioned how baseball actually in high school and in college really helped you to comply, and like Brody, you worked with your treatment center in Colorado to find a routine and a rhythm that made sense, and baseball was kind of, it sounds like, your anchor for your compliance.
Yeah, honestly, like I don't think I would have ever profied except for having baseball and having like a reason to infuse and like reason to want to stay healthy and be able to play the game with my friends. And the only reason I infused was so I could keep doing that. And I actually really struggled after college to keep infusing because I didn't have that physical outlet anymore, and like I didn't feel like there was a reason to keep infusing. So I stopped actually for quite a while and had more bleeds than probably I've had my entire life until I found the outdoors and climbing and found that new physical outlet.
Well, tell us, how did you find the outdoors? How did you find mountaineering?
Started talking to my uncle. He lives up in the mountains in Colorado at a place called Keystone. And I was like, maybe I'll just come up and check that out. And I had been skiing a few times when I was a kid, but I'd never really kept up with it. I was like, let's just try it again. And went up and started hanging out with him and just fell in love with it. And we did this thing called skinning. So it's you put these things on the bottom of your skis called skins, and you can slide them uphill, but they won't slide backwards. And I got to the top of the ski area, and like the sun was coming up, and it was just the most beautiful thing. And it was kind of like hooked from that moment on. And yeah, and then I just started climbing everything I could.
You're also a board member with Save One Life. Can you describe a little bit about Save One Life and their work?
Yeah, so Save One Life is an international hemophilia nonprofit that helps people with hemophilia in developing countries, mainly through sponsorships. So basically with Save One Life, you can, if you live here or any other developed country, you can sponsor a child in that country that has hemophilia. And the money, it's $24 a month. It's not a lot of money for us, but it goes a long way for them. In most of these countries, they make less than $1 a day. And so this money goes to helping pay for food, helping them for transportation to the hospital when they do have bleeds, because a lot of them, their parents can't take off work to take them to the hospital because it's the only way to make money for their family and feed their family. And then also to keep them in school, which is probably the most crucial thing for somebody with hemophilia in a developing country, because a lot of them come from very poor families that, you know, rely on manual labor for income. And if you have hemophilia there and no treatment, you can't do manual labor. You know, you can barely walk. So keeping them in school, and Save One Life also provides educational scholarships so they can actually get degrees after their normal school and hopefully become nurses or do IT work or all sorts of stuff. We've had a lot of good success with that program, which is cool.
We talked a bit about how the documentary is intended to, in part, profile the disparity of care in the developed and developing world, but mountaineering and hemophilia community in the developing world is actually it's been a part of your life for quite a while now, starting with Kilimanjaro, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny how this whole journey started. I was actually working in a hemophilia research lab in Colorado after college, which was really cool. But my boss was working with Indiana's treatment center on a program in Kenya. And one day she reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to go to Kenya and help me work in the lab there?" And I didn't even let her finish the sentence. I was like, yeah, I want to go. And as soon as that conversation was over, I went and Googled where Kilimanjaro was in relation to where we were going. And I was like, oh, they're pretty close, so let's just go for it. And I'd never climbed a big mountain like that before, so I thought this was a good chance to do it. And but then I think my whole kind of perspective on life changed as soon as I went to Kenya. We flew in, we'd been traveling for 30 some hours, got to the hospital, or got to the place we were staying. It was only 9 in the morning, so we just decided to go over to the hospital to see kind of where we were working. And we met this boy there that he was 14 years old, and he had hemophilia, but nobody in the hospital knew that he had hemophilia. It was very obvious to us. He had swollen knees and swollen elbows from 14 years of no factor and bleeds, and he had gone in for surgery. He had abdominal pain. So they removed his appendix because they thought, oh, his abdominal pain, appendix, not knowing he had hemophilia. And so when we got there, he was almost dead. And it was a really powerful moment, realizing how fortunate I was to have the treatment I have and be even thinking about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, where there's people around the world that, are literally dying from this condition. So it kind of motivated me to make my climbing about raising awareness and helping support those guys around the world.
What was the experience like in Nepal, meeting the community there on the cusp of going to Mount Everest?
Nepal, I mean, all of us that went, all the Believe guys that went, and you, and we all keep talking about how it just felt like another home to us. The people in Nepal were so welcoming and so generous, and it's a special place. They have very little in that country, but they are appreciative for everything they have and anything that people do for them, and that was incredibly powerful to witness. And their support of my climb was really cool. I was kind of nervous actually at first, going to their country to climb the highest mountain, and I didn't want to feel like, or them to feel like I was kind of stepping on their toes, I don't.
Or boasting or showing off
or something.
Yeah, sure.
And they never made me feel like that. They always just were really excited to have me climb it, and actually had a flag, a Save One Life flag, that I took to the summit, and I had all of them sign it when I met them in the country, so it was kind of cool. It felt like I had them with me the whole way up the mountain, and it was in my pocket the whole way. So it meant a lot to me.
So a lot of these climbs are several days, a couple weeks, but Everest is particularly calendar heavy. How long was the soup to nuts experience?
Actually, at base camp and up on the mountain, we were there 47 days. But it took 9 days just to get to base camp from this town called Lukla that you fly to. And then we were also in Nepal for a week before that with filming with the hemophilia community. So I think I was there 60 some days. I don't remember exactly, but 2 months. 2 months, yeah.
And we won't get into all the specifics of kind of how it works, but once you get to base camp, you're essentially acclimating and doing this almost interval training where you start getting your body used to those higher elevations until finally it's the summit push. Can you take us through your summit push and the moment that you shared with Tashi on that journey?
Yeah, the summit push, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It takes a week. So you leave base camp. The first day you climb through, it's called the Khumbu Icefall, which is where, if you've seen any like pictures of Everest where people are going over ladders and doing that stuff, that's the Khumbu Icefall. It's very intimidating, kind of scary place, and hard place. And you go from base camp through that one day up to, it's called Camp 2. And then you have another rest day there. Then the next day you go from there to Camp 3, which is up this place called Lhotse Face, which is this real steep, just sheer ice face that you climb up and sleep on the side of, which is really scary. Like, you can't get out of your tent without your crampons on, which are these really sharp spikes on your feet, because if you fall, like, there's nowhere to stop, which is kind of scary.
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
A little scary.
Yeah.
And then there you go to Camp 4, and each day is like 4,000 vertical feet, or 3,000 vertical feet of climbing. So it's not 3,000, it's a lot of climbing. And you get up to Camp 4, which is like 26,000 feet, and you're on oxygen for the first time, and that's a whole wild experience. And then when you get to Camp 4, you really don't sleep there. You get there at like 4 in the afternoon, and then we left at 11 that night. So you just kind of get in your tent, and you don't even take your down suit off because it's just more effort than it's worth. So you just leave it on and kind of lay down on the ground and try and rest as much as possible. You don't really sleep up there because there's no air. And then you leave at 11 p.m. to go for the summit. And it took us 11 hours to get to the summit. And about 10 hours in, you get to this point called the South Summit and Hillary Step, which is a pretty famous part of the climb. But it's this knife edge ridge right before the summit, and it's really intimidating. Like, it's just rock and ice, and it's very very narrow. And I got to that point. Oh, and the scariest part is you can see 9,000 feet down off the side, and I saw that, and that I was really tired. Because obviously, I was really, really tired, and I saw that, and I was like, I think that's too much. I don't think I can do this. And I kind of sat down on this piece of ice up right before the South Summit, and Tashi, he was our head Sherpa.
The Sherpas are, what are the Sherpas?
There are people in Nepal that live kind of in that region. So Sherpa's not, a lot of people think it just means porter, but Sherpa is like actually a family, a cultural name for a group of people in Nepal. And they're the most amazing, strongest, humblest people I've ever met in my life. They get to the top of Everest like it's nothing, they're not even tired. And I was just like, oh, I could sleep for weeks. But anyway, I was sitting there, and Tashi came up to me, and I told him, I was like, I think I'm done. I don't think I can do this. And he turned to me and he says, you're not done. You have a mission, you have a purpose. You can do this. And he took his carabiner on a tether, so you're clipped to these like ropes, and he clipped his carabiner through mine and just started walking. And like, I stood up and I was like, okay, we're doing this. And we got right into the bottom of the South Summit, and like, obviously he unclipped for me, but just that moment of like him believing in me and gave me the confidence that I could do this and I could succeed. And once we got into the section, it wasn't as bad as I thought. It looked bad, but it wasn't so bad. And then we made it to the summit, and it was probably the most overwhelming moment of my life to be on the top of the world and having made it and carrying that Save One Life flag. It was pretty incredible.
I think something that you share that I think is important is how your message isn't, hey, you can go climb Everest. What is the message that you hope people take away from this?
Don't let hemophilia be an excuse for you not to pursue your dreams, because we can overcome our hemophilia, and you can get to choose the life, or live the life you choose, instead of the one you're told you have to live. And I think that's the most important thing I've learned through this whole journey is, if you have enough drive and enough desire to do something, you can figure it out. You can figure out a way to do it.
And while Everest isn't necessarily in everybody's wheelhouse, you are a believer in the outdoors and the importance of the outdoors and for our community.
The company I work for is called Gut Monkey, and we do a lot of outdoor education and experiential education stuff. So we do a lot of backcountry river trips that we take people with bleeding disorders on, a lot of summer camps that we do. And there's just something very special and magical about being outside and therapeutic, you know. You get to learn a lot about yourself while you're outside. And in Colorado, we do this program called Backpacks and Bleeders too, that we started a few years ago. And it's just this hiking program to introduce outside, you know, hiking and outdoor activities to our community and try and change the culture of believing that you can't do things with hemophilia. And like, you can go hiking in Colorado. You can go hiking in Iowa. There's lots of places to go hiking. There's state parks, and just introducing people to this beautiful world that we have. So,
Round of applause for Kari, Brody, and Chris for getting up here and sharing so openly. Thank you, guys.
To watch video from any of our previous Powering Through sessions, visit poweringthrough.org, or to learn more about National Cornerstone Healthcare Services, NCHS, visit nchswecare.com.